And welcome back to Retro Wrestling Games Presents. I'm your host, Lex G, and with me as always is my good friend, Matt Riley. How you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm awake.
Well, drink up that Mountain Dew, get your Red Bulls, because tonight we're talking about WWF Wrestlefest for the arcade. Wrestlefest for the arcade is the greatest wrestling arcade game ever, and it's pretty close to being the best wrestling game ever. It came out in June 1991, released by Technos of Japan, and it has such superstars as Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, the Big Boss Man Jake the Snake Roberts, Earthquake, Sergeant Slaughter, Mr. Perfect, Demolition Smash, and Demolition Crush. And the final bosses of the game are the Legion of Doom, Road Warrior Hawk, and Road Warrior Animal. In this game, there are two modes. Number one is the Tag Team Challenge mode, where you go and defeat all the other tag teams to get a shot at the Legion of Doom for the WWF Tag Team Championships. The second mode is a Royal Rumble mode, where you fight everyone that's on the roster, throw them out, and win the match. Now, playing this game for the first time in about 20 years, it is a quarter sucker, my friends. For you to get through the entire game, you constantly have to plug in quarters to regain health. So again, if you're going to play this game in the arcade, make sure you have about $20 in quarters, because if you're playing it for the first time, you're going to have to buy quite a bit of energy. This is the second Technos WWF game, first being WWF Superstars, which came out about 2 years earlier, which is also a fantastic game. Now, this game visually blows that game away. The sprites are all large, well-defined, you know who everyone is, and everyone looks fantastic. The grappling holds are awesome. Again, the controls are so good that a lot of these games, you're trying to do something, you can't pull it off. This game, it's really simple. Really easy to learn, difficult to master. In addition, you have double team moves. So you can tag it with a partner, and then if you're in a proper position, you can do a tag team move. And this game is notable because it has finishers or super holds. So Hulk Hogan has his leg drop, the Ultimate Warrior has the splash, Bossman has the Bossman slam. Sergeant Slaughter has the Atomic Noogie, which is an awesome move.
What?
Yes, you never seen him use the Atomic Noogie?
I did. I just didn't know it was a noogie.
Yeah, it's a noogie. God bless Sergeant Slaughter with the Atomic Noogie. You should use that move more often. So when I was a kid, this game was in a local movie theater that was by my house. And it was one of those kind of, I guess, the old school movie theaters where the box office was on the outside of the movie theater. So for you to get in, you would have to buy a ticket. And I missed the 10 minutes of like every movie I saw that year because I was too busy playing WrestleFest. And so I was always coming in the about 10 minutes into each and every movie that I seen at the time because I was too busy playing WrestleFest. Great game overall. If you have not played it, please play it. Stop the video right now. Download MAME, get an emulator, play this game because you're going to love it. Now, the WWE felt the need, and rightfully so, to make a remake of this game in 2012 called WWE Wrestlefest. So it had some modern WWF stars, which would be The Undertaker, John Cena, Randy Orton, Rey Mysterio, and some legends like Stone Cold, Jake Roberts, and Randy Savage. Speaking of Randy Savage, he is not featured in the WWF Wrestlefest. So I assume the roster was made sometime in early 91 or late 1990. The Royal Rumble 91, but again, for a brief appearance just to sneak attack the Ultimate Warrior. So a notable exclusion, but by the time it came out in June 91, he was already retired and doing commentary at this point. So I still miss Macho Man. I am a knight of the Kingdom of the Madness. So just keep that in mind, everyone. I am a big Randy Savage fan. So, Matt, have you played WWF Wrestlefest?
Oh, I played. In fact, I used to play. 91 was my senior year, and we used to go to this arcade called Fun Time. And Fun Time, the best part of Fun Time was it was one of those dying arcades in the mall, and the guy behind the counter was an ex-con who would give you the quarters, but you could also just have him tell you stories about being in prison.
Nice.
So it was cool. Yeah, and we'd play. The game was right near where the arcade coin station was. And you just you put your quarter on the on the panel, like wait your turn. But like if you were really good, you'd play for a while, you know. And that though was such a quarter killer. Oh my god, that was almost as bad as
Dragon Lair.
Dragon Lair.
All right, fantastic. So this game came out in June '91. I guess you would say it would take place somewhere in early '91, late 1990. And the biggest thing going on at a time of professional wrestling was Sergeant Slaughter's turn to the dark side. Now, Sergeant Slaughter had recently been in the AWA, where he's been, I believe he was a babyface at the time. He came into the WWF around SummerSlam. I believe he made an appearance at SummerSlam 90 at the Brother Love show. He would do these vignettes claiming that America's gone soft, that America wasn't as tough as it used to be. And it's an interesting concept. So at that time, where the Cold War is coming to an end, and I wonder how a lot of these people at the time were taking like these soldiers and these people that were really patriotic and what have you, and kind of war hawks, I guess you would call them, felt about the end of the Cold War. I mean, we've been fighting the Russians on various fronts for about 50 years. So I wonder how we're becoming friends with Russia. The Berlin Wall is soon to come down. How did people take that? And it's an interesting character point that I don't think they really push that hard, is that he's a guy that really wants a strong military and be strong, but there's no one to fight anymore.
Right.
So at this time, Slaughter being Slaughter, witnesses, I guess you would say, Iraq, who invaded Kuwait in August of 1990, and they basically occupied them for the time being. The United States and its friends over in the UN were pretty upset about that. And pretty much right after that, they started Operation Desert Shield. I found that real interesting to me because I would hear stories about World War II and the Vietnam War, and I wasn't alive yet. So it was the first time in my lifetime that the United States has been in a war. And as an 8-year-old or 9-year-old, I thought that was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. As we know that, war is not cool, and it's really... it's really messed up and screwed up, and a lot of our veterans that are coming back, telling their horror stories and what have you. So, but as a 9-year-old kid coming off the super patriotic 80s and G.I. Joe, I thought the war was the coolest thing. So at that time, Sergeant Slaughter had pledged his allegiance to Saddam Hussein. And by some way, he got a title shot at the Royal Rumble. I don't know how, because he was only feuding with like Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Tito Santana, and Nikolai Volkov. So it was very strange that he got a title shot out of nowhere.
Right.
So at the Royal Rumble 1991, with the help from the Macho Man Randy Savage, who he promised a title shot to if he defeat the Ultimate Warrior, won the WWF Championship from the Ultimate Warrior. Hogan not being outdone, he won the 1999 Royal Rumble, and it set up a blood feud between Hogan and Slaughter.
Blood feud.
That will take place at WrestleMania VII. So what are your thoughts about Sergeant Slaughter becoming an Iraqi sympathizer?
Oh, it was the height of sensationalism, but I mean, looking back, you understand why. I mean, when you think of wrestling way back when, even with the Fritz and Waldo von Erich, the German Nazi bad guys, how many masked Russians do we have to deal with? You had Crusher Khrushchev, Ivan Koloff, Nikita Koloff.
Don't forget about those sneaky Japanese who always Pearl Harbor people.
Always throwing salt, and I will tell you, just for you kids out there as a PSA, don't throw salt in your friend's eyes, as I did in high school. Where I was like, hey, look, I'm Mr. Fuji. And it was like, Tom was like, ah! So salt will actually hurt someone's eyes.
Yes.
Don't do it. So, yeah, I felt it was appropriate in the sense that, they're going to go with it. I only thought it was inappropriate in the sense it was like you said, like, he's feuding with Jim Duggan, now he's got a title shot.
Yeah.
But they were just riding the hot story.
Now, looking back at Slaughter, he didn't look like he was in the best condition in terms of a professional wrestler. Now, you can see guys like Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior all jacked up. And you see Slaughter, who looks like, a middle-aged dude, off the street in some bar somewhere. But all of a sudden, he's getting a title shot. They really pushed this angle, down our throats. Was the angle in poor taste? I don't think so. A lot of people will say, "Oh, it's very Red State," that whole angle, and it is to a certain degree, but it's still very entertaining. And having that match at WrestleMania, and the lead up to that was, it was real simple too. It wasn't even that complex. Hogan upset that Slaughter had won the belt, and he's down with the Iraqis. Basically set up that match, and then they did a couple of things that were real simple. They took a Hogan poster, and Slaughter did a promo on it and burned the poster. They followed that up where, now, supposedly, according to Slaughter, they wanted him to burn the American flag, but he wouldn't do it. So instead, he burned a Hulk Hogan T-shirt that went up like it was like dousing gasoline. It was insane. So I don't know how flame retardant those shirts were. So if you wore them in the 80s and got set on fire, I don't think anything was gonna put you out. And basically, they have two altercations. So the first one being Slaughter had a match with Duggan, beats the snot out of Duggan. Hogan comes in, Slaughter wipes him out with a chair. Then they have another altercation where Hogan's facing Adnan. General Adnan was Sergeant Slaughter's manager at the time. Again, it used to be Billy White Wolf at one point, a Native American character, and he was an Iraqi character in the AWA before coming to WWF. So Adnan's been around for a while, and Hulk Hogan beat the shit out of him. And Slaughter comes in, and they beat up Hogan. Slaughter has Hogan in the camel clutch, and Adnan is shoving the belt in his face, kind of mocking Hogan, not realizing that the belt is upside down. Again, there's a lot of references to the Iraq War and Iraq and Middle East in general, in this angle. Again, it felt very nationalistic, and they use, words that we're hearing at TV, as kids. Hulk Hogan made reference to one of his promos prior to WrestleMania that Slaughter is so dastardly that he will shoot a Scud missile at one of his Hulkamaniacs while they're doing their homework to ensure that they couldn't cheer for him at WrestleMania VII.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
So Hulk Hogan claimed that Sergeant Slaughter was going to shoot a missile at a child so they couldn't cheer for him at WrestleMania. That's fantastic.
That's appropriate.
Yeah. Hogan also referred to his arms as Patriot missiles. Now, for those of you who don't know who are Patriot missiles, they were created to take down the Iraqi technologies. They had Scud missiles. We had the Patriot missiles, so the Patriot missiles could take out the Scuds. So that was a big thing. Hogan had mentioned that he was going to use aerial tactics, which he does in this match at WrestleMania 7, but it's more like a double X handle. Bless his heart. And they did a series of vignettes where Hulk Hogan was going around to the various military bases around the world, cheering up the troops and posing, taking pictures, doing autographs. There's a famous scene of him in a cockpit of a jet. There's one that he parachuted out, and they're showing that. So, Hogan trained by going to these bases around the world and getting ready for Slaughter. Now, as a personal story for this match and for this era and time, I am 8 years old, I believe, at the time. 9 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, what have you. And the WrestleMania 7 would have been the third pay-per-view that I had watched live. Now, I've been watching wrestling since 1987, but pay-per-view at that time was super expensive. It wasn't available everywhere and what have you. By the time the early 90s came around, they were more moderately priced and available. So at this time, I'm watching wrestling religiously. And I remember the build up to this match. And as a kid, I was worried that Hulk Hogan was not going to win the WWF Championship. Which sounds crazy nowadays, because if you look at Slaughter's condition and Hogan's history, or what have you, just about everyone in the arena and just everyone as a wrestling fan knew that Hogan was going to walk out of WrestleMania 7 with the belt. But as a 8-year-old, using 8-year-old logic, it was like this. Hogan lost to Warrior. Slaughter beat Warrior. So Slaughter should be able to beat Hogan. And on top of that, Slaughter said he's going to use a new set of rules. So he didn't care if he got disqualified or counted out. There was no way that Hogan was leaving WrestleMania 7 with the belt. He was not going to let that happen. If it meant he had to pick up a chair and whack Hogan or punch the referee, he was going to retain the belt. Didn't matter if he would have lost the match. So me, as an 8-year-old, I was concerned that, oh my God, this guy's going to break the rules. He's going to get himself disqualified, and Hogan wasn't going to win the belt. And there's a funny story where my mom says, like, I was literally on the edge of my seat watching that match, nervous, biting my fingernails because I thought Hulk Hogan was not going to win. Long story short, Hogan does win. I go home happy, and I take my championship belt off of my Sergeant Slaughter action figure and put it on my Hulk Hogan action figure. And for one night, all was right with the world. So do you think Slaughter was the right guy to portray this role, with his history as being Mr. G.I. Joe, very patriotic? You think that was a good turn for him?
I do, in a sense of they didn't have any wrestler with a connection to the Middle East.
Right.
If they were going to play on that as an angle, I don't see. You can probably remember more than I can. Why not just have a Hogan Warrior rematch?
That was the original main event.
So what happened?
At some point, they had changed their mind because Warrior wasn't drawing as champion. So the idea was from WrestleMania 6. So they're going to do the rematch at WrestleMania 7, and they're going to sell 100,000 tickets to sell out the LA Sports Coliseum. But something along the way happened where they didn't trust Warrior, or they didn't think that he was going to draw because apparently he wasn't drawing on house shows or pay-per-view buy rates. Anytime they would draw, they would kind of supplement them with Hogan, a la SummerSlam 90. So they changed their mind on that for whatever reasons, and they wanted to have Hogan versus a foreign heel as their main event. And their original choice for the foreign heel, and I mentioned this before, was good old Sheik Tugboats, a.k.a. the Shockmaster.
Yes.
A.k.a. Uncle Fred, who was going to be the Iraqi sympathizer, but they were able to get Slaughter instead. Yeah, that whole WrestleMania 7 fiasco where they claimed that they moved the venue because of bomb threats, but that venue only held 15,000 people, and they're looking for a $100,000 sellout.
Oh.
So I guess when they sold the advance on it, and if it wasn't going to hit the number, they concocted the story that there's going to be bomb threats, and it was security purposes at this point. But it's funny because by that time the war was already over anyway, so there was no bomb threats. And you're telling me that a American was going to bomb other Americans, including Hulk Hogan? I don't buy that. So,
well, you never know. What about Shockmaster came back for revenge?
It's a good possibility. And then post this match, they did something interesting. So usually WrestleMania is the blow-off, right, for the most part. Hogan has his big win. This feud continued into SummerSlam. So directly after WrestleMania 7, Slaughter does the old, I'm going to throw fire in your eyes.
Oh, yeah.
So he threw fire in his eyes. Hogan is blinded, what have you, and they go on from there, and then they bring in the Iron Sheik as Colonel Mustafa. So now they're the Triangle of Terror. So they run that feud all the way up to SummerSlam, where it's Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior versus Sergeant Slaughter, General Adnan, and the Iron Sheik, with special guest referee Sid Justice.
Sid Justice,
a.k.a. Sid Vicious, a.k.a. Psycho Sid. So basically, at the end of that match, they go through the whole thing. Warrior chases out the baddies with a steel chair, and then Warrior's missing for another year. So the big story on that is that Warrior kind of blackmailed the WWF, saying that if you don't pay me X amount of dollars, he wasn't going out there performing. So Vince gave him his check and fired him at that show.
Nice.
But at the end of the night, you see Sid Justice and Hulk Hogan posing, because Sid Justice was going to be the newest Hulkamaniac, Hogan's brand new friend that will turn on him in about 6 months. Again, those memories for me are very, very vivid. Again, it was the third pay-per-view I had watched live. The first one being SummerSlam 90. I had gotten the Survivor Series 90 as well. I had missed the Royal Rumble, and then I watched WrestleMania 7. And I was over my dad's friend's house, so there's a bunch of us over there. And everyone seemed to really like the show. But looking back at the show, a lot of the noise or cheers are piped into that show. It's very noticeable during the Hart Foundation Nasty Boy matches where you hear the cheers, but you don't see anyone in the crowd reacting, which is very strange. So you definitely know that show was sweetened a little bit, as they say. So, which they used to do on SmackDown too all the time, by the way. So what are your memories on the first Iraq War, and what was kind of the thought process of the people that you were around with at the time?
Well, I was a senior in high school, so of course there were girls wearing, I really no blood for oil, denim jackets, and we talked about getting drafted, and we were all worried about that, but it was pretty much over and done with real quick, so it wouldn't really matter. As far as the wrestling aspect of it went, it was kind of like Iron Sheik, like they dusted him off, and I remember they brought in like Daivari years later, but they never really had a legitimate Middle Eastern wrestler.
Yeah.
Like even the Iron Sheik, it was like, he won the title, but then he won the World Tag Titles, but it was always like he cheated to win, and I always felt like when they weren't a viable threat, it was like, whatever. So I think Sergeant Slaughter even, with the fire, it's like, all right. I wasn't a big fan of it at the time. I look back now, I'm like, I understand what they're doing. But like you said earlier, it'd be like them now having John Cena join ISIS or something like that. Or Hacksaw. Actually, if Hacksaw Jim Duggan came back, turned on Cena, and was like, I'm all about ISIS, then it would be like, okay, he's a washed up, fat wrestler, way over his, past his prime, getting a top main event type push.
Remember Duggan betrayed America and joined Team Canada?
No, I don't remember that.
Yes, because it was WCW 2000 and no one remembers that.
Oh, Duggan.
It's because no one was watching. Now, here's a loaded question for you.
Uh-oh.
Could a Middle Eastern-born babyface work today?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it could. I would... The only example I can come to think of is the Arabian Dream Ali Atari. But that's, in the LWL Lone Wolf League and not in real wrestling. Right. But I think if a wrestler's good enough, he'll get over. I remember they had Daivari and some other guy, but they were always like the terrorist gimmick.
Yeah, that was Muhammad Hassan.
And it's actually why I never played, in the game I'm talking about, I never played that character of Atari as the typical, like, ye terrorist, yeah. I think it's overdone, and I think nowadays, political culture being what it is, it would be really poorly received if they had like a guy come out and be like, I'm for ISIS.
Yeah.
I could see them doing more of the case. We've seen kind of, the foreigners, like they had their poor man's Foreign Legion with Sheamus and Del Rio, and they were just like, yeah, we're from other countries, but they never made them really do anything. I think the problem is they don't give them any viable task to do. Right. So they have nothing to work off of, and if they're not a legit threat, what do I care what they do? If they're going to get scrubbed out, well, I don't care what match you put them in, they're going to lose. I know they're going to lose. Right. They're not a threat.
What about Yoko in '93? Which was just weird because they were still using that Japanese thing where.
Yes, the fat sumo wrestler.
Yeah, that was like something they would do in the '50s and '60s, and we're pretty friendly with Japan. They're not really someone who we considered, they're not Russia. They're not some of these other countries that we had issues with. So, and Yokozuna wasn't even Japanese; he was Samoan. And Mr. Fuji was Hawaiian, so
yes.
There you go on that. The WWE liked to say Jap a lot back in the day. It was like watching it now, it's a little off-putting.
Yeah, it's like a lot. It reminds you of when you talk to your grandparents. They said color person. They're that colored fella. Yeah. It's just times have changed. I almost think that the WWE should do what Warner Brothers does, with their a little precursor saying this was created at a time when certain things were socially acceptable. We've not changed to take away from that. But like having Jesse Ventura or Bobby the Heenan say things like "them Japs," Pearl Harbor job, I think is a way of getting angles across. In today's environment, you can do it, but I think a lot of the times they're almost afraid to, because I think they realize how racially charged the country is right now.
But it's fun. I think it's perfectly acceptable for a heel to do it. See, back in the day, like Gorilla used to say that shit all the time. Hogan used to say Jap all the time. And that's where it's uncomfortable now with Bobby Heenan or Jesse Ventura because they're bad people, right? It's okay for them to say that, but when like Hogan says it, that's where it's jarring.
Well, I'll give you Greg the Racist Valentine. One of the best YouTube clips you'll see if you want to see a really uncomfortable Gene Okerlund trying to cover a promo by Greg the Hammer Valentine on Junkyard Dog, calling him that filthy black person. Like, oh my God, like you're like, oh no. But again, like times have changed, and it really, I think the way it works now in wrestling in real world, if you will, is they've gotten away from those kind of cheap heat, if you will, angles. Giving us the high class angles of you're a diva and I'm not. Yes, that's right.
God help us. So, guys, we are officially out of time, but I just want to thank each and every one of you for your support for this channel, for this show. So please join me on my quest to play every wrestling video game ever. That's what I'm shooting for, guys. So please support the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, make a suggestion. I am open. My ears are open. I am open for all suggestions. So I just want to thank you out in advance. Check out some of our other videos. Lots of new content coming soon. So thank you so much, guys. For Matt Riley, I am Alex G, and this has been Retro Wrestling Game Presents WrestleFest.